Again, you're one of the few individuals who's registered, and so we're interested to hear your experience. Perhaps you could tell us a little about your perspective and so forth.
Now, I just want to check behind me because what I say is going to upset somebody, but it'll be on public record. My problem's where to start. The reason I look behind me, I don't want a lot of shoes being thrown at me, you see, so...
If there are any shoes, we'll deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. As long as I get them back, you see. My little category, we weren't sure where to fit it in because it definitely impacts on customer service. But as a technician, and I'm not looking at everything technologically based, but I'm involved on a lot of faults that customers very bitterly complain about. Now, the issue is, and it's not just directed in this case at Telstra. Telstra happens to be the incumbent that owns the copper network. So, as such, everybody's dependent upon them. The faults that I go on to stop internet services working. There's various forms of DSL. The main problem I have is with SHDSL, which is a naked DSL that doesn't have a phone service with it. But even on telephone services that share ADSL, somebody was mentioning the differences between... There is a distinction drawn between internet services and PSTN services. If you ring up and complain that you've got a DSL fault, basically you're told exactly what they say in America and Britain, and we've only got to provide a PSTN service. You're using it for internet. Now, every DSL was designed to work over the same bearer as the PSTN that it shares with. Like SHDSL cannot share it, it uses the whole spectrum. The thing is, their modems fail to sync, so their internet stops. For days and days they're told to restart their modem, or their lines become noisy. They fail intermittently. If it's ADSL and it's shared with a phone and they pick up the phone to report the complaint, all of a sudden their internet comes back. The reason is it's a fault in the copper network that for years and years hasn't been tested properly. Now, I've contacted the Telecom Industry Ombudsman and everybody else, a few that have been here before today, and I've contacted Telstra. I've demonstrated to Telstra what the fault is. The reason I had to do this was that they don't send technicians once or twice to problems, they send them 7 and 8 times. Every time I go back as a contractor to test, the company that's got the service has to pay me as well, so there are huge expenses for everybody else except Telstra. Telstra tests the line under standard industry practices. There's nothing wrong with the actual method that's used, but what they do is the problem. We follow America and British telecom practices, New Zealand and Singapore Telecom, Malaysia Telecom. Everybody with copper networks has the same sort of troubles. If you Google what's called high open, these are American terms, it doesn't mean a thing technically. They have these faults they describe where their internet fails. They've reported it to the carrier many times. It happens all over the world, different telcos, and it's not fixed. Now, the reason for it is that the test levels and signals that are used to do the tests actually destroy the fault that they're looking for. Telstra's mandatory testing destroys the fault that they're actually looking for. Now, at Telstra's request, I went to some of their technical officers and I demonstrated what they're doing wrong, how to use their existing equipment to detect this fault, and then accurately how to measure the distance to this fault from the customer's premises or the exchange. Telstra, when they send somebody and they determine that, in their experience with their testing, that no fault is found, they charge a call-out fee. for an incorrect call-out. It's over $100. It's $105 plus something. It usually ends up around about $130. So even though the customer's jumping up and down and their service would normally be satisfactory for them, the techniques that are used are not adequate for the particular fault. The reason is that the test signal levels are too high. Now, you can go and buy a Chinese meter up the road for $60 that will do these tests. But the little leather-cased meter that Telstra, every telecom technician carries one of these in his van nationally. That same meter can be used to detect this fault if Telstra does the most basic test for telephony, for the integrity of the line, which they don't do anymore, and that's just a basic continuity test of the whole line. If they tested it with the range that they don't use at the moment, it would show up this fault 100% of the time without failure. When they know that the fault is present, as long as they don't use the technique that they use now and destroy it, they can then measure the distance to it and pinpoint where it is, then gives them the option of fixing it. This high open that I mentioned, it's an American term, of course. The complaint is you use your service normally, but like if your internet disappears and your modem fails to synchronise, all you have to do is lift the telephone off its handset. Just hold it in your hand, you don't have to do anything. But the transmission feed supplied from the exchange then gives a current through that service that breaks down this fault. It'll conduct, the data modulates it and comes through full speed. It's a very common fault. Makes me feel uneasy describing this because it's probably other places in the world know about this, but Telstra chooses not to follow it up.
It's an interesting issue, certainly.
It's driving me nuts. It costs me a lot of money to go back and prove that it's not our fault. Yeah. I prove that the integrity of the building cabling and the modem or router or whatever it is fine. I do the other end in the telephone exchange, the DSLAM equipment, prove that's fine. The only intervening bit is the copper connection. Now, many times I've contacted Telstra in Melbourne that lays down all the standards that all of us technicians must follow. The fellow in Melbourne is an advisor to David Thodey. Telstra Wholesale advises the current CEO of how they test and what goes on. David Thodey sent me an email to say that he's quite comfortable with the testing that's already done. But the testing that's done destroys the fault. They don't find it. They charge $100 and something for a false call out. So they're being rewarded for being incompetent as far as I'm concerned. Before, Telstra claimed that they didn't know about this fault. If such a fault existed, we would have found it by now. I've been sworn at, abused, all sorts of things, but they've never once said, we'll work with you and solve this fault. Now, every time, without fail, that I've arranged to meet a Telstra technician on site, we fixed the fault. Because when I show them, I'm willing to demonstrate this to anyone that's interested, by the way, how to do this test free of charge with Telstra's existing equipment. But the strange thing is, for some reason, Telstra is refusing to even admit the fault exists.
Mr Ashford, without discounting the importance of the issue, is it possible to frame it though, put it in this customer service or complaints handling framework that we've been going through today? I can see it could raise, inappropriate billing issues.
It causes dissatisfaction with customers.
Yeah.
Because Telstra owns the copper network, they've got the last say in this.
So is your issue that when there's a dispute between a customer and a carrier or a provider about which raises a technical issue, the system is not very. There's a problem with having that kind of issue correctly resolved because there's nobody to go to. Is that your problem?
Well, the problem is that even after you demonstrate it and prove that it exists, the carrier won't change their methods.
So when you went to the TIO, what was the TIO?
The TIO can't do anything. I wrote to, this is 3 years ago, mind you, Senator Conroy, Stephen Conroy, Minister for Communications and Broadband. He advised me to go to the TIO, the Telecom Industry Ombudsman, but the Telecom Industry Ombudsman can only look after individuals with complaints, not me as a contractor. I'm in the middle. So I can get people to make specific complaints and they can look into it, but it doesn't address the whole issue because this affects everybody. If the same mentality is taken to the NBN, we'd be in the same boat. Like the monopoly-minded attitude is, we don't have to do this, we'll do our own internal practices or whatever it is, satisfactory or not. It doesn't show up the fault. In fact, as I said, they destroy it. I've known people have replaced modems and routers, computers, because there's no fault found. They equate that to there is no fault, which is wrong.
Are you saying that there's no alternative technical view on this matter? Because the response that you've indicated that Mr Thody gave would suggest that it might be a matter on which technically trained people might differ.
Well, they don't. The trouble is that my wife and I went to Singapore, Malaysia and whatever in March. My wife's Malaysian Chinese. As we happened to be in Singapore, I dragged her along to Singtel that owns Optus. I gave them all this information because they're all interested. The problem is if they rock the boat with Telstra, for example, they're worried that their faults might go to the bottom of the queue and this type of thing. So they can't actually do anything about it. But as a sole trader, I can bring it to the public view, can't I? I've done that.
You have?
I have. So the thing is, I can't understand why Telstra doesn't want to find these faults and win customers back on pure merit. I think if you continue to get paid $100 and something for being inept, you'd probably go ahead with the same thing yourself, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
But I would like, if possible, the ACMA or somebody, some appropriate body that I'll demonstrate to, I can show them exactly how this fault occurs and there won't be any disagreement with other technical personnel because I've had engineers and other people view this. Telstra told me they were going to refer it to their technical section, but they never did. And after several years of it, after I demonstrated it to their nominated technical people as well, and they were impressed, and said, look, we've been dealing with cables for 40 years and all this, and didn't know this and didn't know that. The faults I'm describing have been known, this particular problem, this issue, has been known since the 1940s. Where is he? 1940s. And there are textbooks. I bought a couple from America. They cost me $200, but they're used in IT training at the moment. They even mention this problem. It's nothing new.
But it might be an interesting issue to, the particular technical issue, to pursue under the rubric of technical standards. But certainly to the extent that your submission raises issues around competition, structural issues in the industry.
But not only that, under your area, world's best practices.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Okay.
So,
well, I think thank you for raising it and putting it in the public domain. That's well and surely, I think, now happened. We will also maybe, we've got some of our technical, you suggested maybe ACMA may want to follow it up. But we'll mention to our technical people and the ACMA.
If you want me to demonstrate something to them, I'll willingly go and do it.
Well, okay, well, we'll take that idea away and we'll see what we do with it. Well, somebody will get in touch with you.
Unless they can refute basic physics and basic electronics, they won't get around it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming on today. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for your patience and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.